All right, we are live, and today we it's just me and Nirav, which is fine.
Hey
But
guys.
Makisha couldn't make it today, um, but it's okay. We're gonna have this topic again later. Today's topic is sex and sexuality in religion, which is a great topic for me to discuss. I because I just recently finished a book. Not recently, it's been a month, I think, about sex and God. And I'm glad that we have Nirav here because um, I don't, most of the time when people talk about religion and different teachings of religion, like sex, for example, they usually are talking about Abrahamic religions and they're ignoring one of world's major religions, which is Hinduism. And I don't know much about Hinduism, but Nirav does, so I'm glad he's here to cover that. Um, and actually, this is very interesting to me because um, sex and sexuality, the influence that religion has on sex and sexuality is not limited to religious circles. Most of the values people have in modern society about religion, about sex and sexual issues, comes from religion, even among people that are not religious. Concepts like monogamy or marriage or people's views on homosexuality or how many partners should one have, or how much, at what age it's okay to start talking to children about sex education, or at what age it's okay for people to have sex, um, masturbation, all of these topics, even among people that are not religious, their values have been heavily influenced by religion. And it's hard for people to imagine that before the Abrahamic religions, a lot of these rules and values were not there. And among non-religious people, it's hard for them to accept some of their values is completely religious, even though they have no religious values. Um, for example, one thing that is very common among many people is the idea of monogamy, uh, which is actually quite recent in world history. Um, it's not something. What do you think about that, Nero? Do you think the concept of monogamy is something that was influenced by religion? Because if you go back to the times before the Abrahamic religions, other religions, their God didn't really have much to say about who we are, what kind of sexual relationships we ought to have or not ought to have. The idea of unions was completely a non-religious issue. Um, and when it comes to non-Abrahamic religions like Hinduism, they not only they didn't have much restrictions towards sex, they were actually very pro sex and sexuality. And only in recent times, religions like Hinduism have been influenced by religions like Christianity and Islam, and now becoming so anti-sex. But historically, that was not the case about it. But what do you think?
Well, I think just picking up on what you said in the last point was that it's not so much that that well, one thing I'd like to clarify is that you can be pro-sex, but that does not mean that you're pro-woman. And that's the truth about Hinduism, because it's a common thing for people to bring up Hindu sculptures and treatises on sex, and this on having goddesses and etc. Big role for women. But it's actually the ground reality is it's a very misogynistic society, and the women, especially as of right now, just a few days ago, a documentary by the BBC on on a horrific rape that had happened in December 2012. was banned by the Indian government because on basically the argument that it makes India look bad, even though was a scathing indictment of the level of misogyny, with the lawyers of the rapist saying that women don't have a role in our society at all, things of that nature. So it was revealing the depth of misogyny. About about the number of partners, I think that's it's like there's a I don't think it's a very strictly by religion governed issue, because in Hinduism, for example, in India in general, you would have polygamy for many generations. There is a philosophy of Ardhangini, which is that a man is a half and his other half is a woman. How does that match up with polygamy? I don't know, but that's like it's one of the abstract concepts that are applied. There was no uniformity. The ruling classes had many spouses and harems. I don't know if it was much of an option for people who are lower on the social order. With in Abrahamic religions too. I mean, if Christianity seems to prefer the just one spouse monogamy, Islam has allows up to four. So there's always been this has been a very modern thing that has come up in the last few centuries, and I seriously doubt if religion was the modernizing influence, because throughout history, religion was actually the force that says it's okay, perfectly okay. If you're a king or a prophet or whatever you are, you can have as many spouses as you like. They were not ever concerned about, what is the ideal uh, partnership for a man and a woman in life.
I are you sure? Because if you look at scripture, like in Islam and Christianity and the teachings, they have. I mean, not maybe they weren't teaching monogamy, but they had a lot to say about what kind of sexual behavior is correct. Especially, at least with Islam, it's very specific about what's okay and what's not okay. And I think that's something new within Abrahamic religions. Like if you look at ancient religions, they didn't have much limitations, but when it comes to Islam and Christianity, they are. I mean, for example, I know Islam allows polygamy, but still, it has a lot of specific rules about, you know, who gets to be with who and how exactly.
Well, in Hinduism, it's basically governed by caste and social status. There wasn't any uniformity. You, now you are a better source for what exactly Islam says, but I think the underlying principle was that it's ultimately whatever is for the people of the day, the ruling classes were the ones that, if you wanted multiple spouses and temporary wives and all those kind of things, you could basically make that arrangement. And it ultimately is like, if we are looking at something and we are saying, okay, Hinduism has this broad, this is acceptable sexual behavior, this is what we think about a man and a woman being together, but underlying the implementation always was a misogynistic one. They didn't count for anything individually. They didn't have any say in the matter. They were always, had to marry whoever the men would decide. And even these, some what we would possibly today consider liberal ideas, were essentially made by men without any consultation of women. So that's like even from the very beginning, there's this structural problem about these rules all being contrived by men, and the idea that a man gives woman his rights is another a serious problem on all religions. So it's
But
go ahead.
one thing that Dr. Darrel Ray says in his book Sex and God, and I will link to the book on the YouTube for this. Um, Let me just increase my volume a little bit. Is that better?
Yeah.
All right. So he says that the Abrahamic religions, they use shaming about your sexuality and your sexual desires in a way to bring you back to religion by setting up rules that they know you are not going to be able to keep. For example, like Doc- Dr. Ray, like he says that everybody is eventually going to, like, for example, as a young adult, you eventually are going to masturbate no matter how religious you are. as a lot of people are eventually going to find out that monogamy doesn't work for them, or they're going to somehow cheat or do something that is ethically not acceptable within their own religious values. Some people, eventually, a lot of young people are going to have sex before marriage, no matter how religious they are. And these rules were there not for the sake of making people follow these rules, but for the sake of people feeling guilty when they break the rules. And that's why they're shaming, and they feeling that they have done something so shameful and so wrong keeps them coming back to God, coming asking for forgiveness. The way, basically, the argument is that if you want people to always be mindful about their God and their religion and always have coming back to you, you have to control something that is always going to be on their mind. And what better way to make people always be mindful about religion than to control something like sex, which is, uh, so um, such a powerful desire in many people. And one thing religion does very very well is to always make you feel not valuable, to always make you feel as if you're not complete, as if you need help. And by making sex seem as if is something bad and something evil, and the fact that you always want it makes you feel bad about yourself and always think that you need help and you need God's help and you need religious help and you need forgiveness for it. And that's the way of always trying to people keep bringing back people to the church or to your mom, always trying to figure out why am I not with God? I know what can I do for God to forgive me? And this is, and again, when it comes to religions coming up with ways that makes them grow faster, this seems not as something that was done purposefully. Like, religion evolves in a way, sometimes it seems like it has these attributes that it seems like genius. It just works perfectly well for it to grow, but it wasn't somebody's idea. It's just like natural evolution and living beings, where we don't have a conscious being at the top that decides what survives and what doesn't. But the elements that survive in the religion are things that make it grow faster, and this is one of them. The fact that religion is now tries to manipulate and control sex and sexuality is one thing that has made it grow much faster when it comes to Abrahamic religions. By the way, we have Sirisha here, which is great. I'm going to let you unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Yeah, I was not aware of the daylight savings time, so I joined you guys a little late. I just finished my dinner right now, so I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's actually probably the reason why there's only three of us today, because a lot of people are trying to sleep here a little bit more, because it's like it's 8 a.m. It's right 9 a.m. right now, but it's for most people it just still feels like 8 a.m. But anyways, I'm
So,
good.
what have I missed until now?
Well, we're discussing how the Abrahamic religions specifically have used sexual shaming as a way to control people and to, I mean, well, that's what I've been saying. I don't know what Nero's thinks about that. And how to bring people back to religion and how to make them feel guilty about who they are, and in a way make them feel that they need God, and they need their religion, and that's been used as a tool to keep bring people back to religion. And again, this is something that I learned by reading a book called Sex and God by Dr. Darrel Ray. So it's not my argument, so I'm not going to take. But
Okay.
what do you think about that?
Mm. Well, I haven't really ventured into the topic much, except for knowing people who have been affected by it directly. So my experience comes from interacting with people who have been following Abrahamic religions and how their ideas have been shaped by religion until now. So there is this friend of mine who is who has very distinct and staunch opinions on homosexuality, for instance. Yeah, I mean, I've heard him speak about it in derogatory terms quite a lot of times, and every time he says something about it, it's basically quoting a book which says something about it, or and something that, I mean, for instance, Hinduism has had a fairly broad-minded outlook in terms of sexuality. Hinduism of older days, not the militant Hinduism that we see in India these days, at least. So it was difficult for me to even imagine that people can be people could talk so derogatorily about another human being just on the basis of their sexual orientation. So, I mean, some of his remarks are so unpalatable that I cannot even mention the kind of things that he was saying about gays and homosexuals, about how he believes they need to be wiped out of the planet. So, yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult topic to talk about when people are deeply religious and they hold certain opinions so definitely. So,
So why do you two think that religions have a problem with homosexuality? And is homophobia mostly a religious thing, or is homophobia that is not religious influenced by religion? Like, is the source of homophobia religious? Because I don't know, in ancient times before Abrahamic religions, there seems to be, like, in ancient Greece and other places, they seem to be didn't have much problem with homosexuality. So it seems also that the whole idea of homophobia comes from the Abrahamic religions. And if that's the case, why was that the case? And why would religion even care about homosexuality? What do you guys think?
Well, firstly, I just want to, the concept that occurs to me is not one of that exactly why it was a big problem. But if you consider, I think a root of this is obviously the Bible, the Old Testament, and afterwards. Abrahamic tradition has imposed an institutional homophobia has been imposed by the Abrahamic faith. It's natural for a lot of men and women to be suspicious and nervous and insecure about homosexuality, but for it to become an institutional way of shaming, persecuting, destroying is entirely religion's responsibility. What I think is in many ways, when a new system comes to power, this is now becoming the dominant religion, Judaism in Palestine, or Islam anywhere, whatever. They take some aspects of the society they have taken over, they'll take some aspects of it and say, this has to go, this has to be eliminated because it's absolutely corrupt, and this is why you need us, this is why we are the ones who will teach you moral behavior. Obviously, they use, homosexuality in Greece, for example, had pederasty, which is a very young boy being used by an adult man, which actually is not very moral. So it's not something that even in today's world would be acceptable. But so in walks a religion that says this is extremely immoral, and that this is non-procreative, so it's not blessed, does not, and they always had their view that sex is what is about God's way to bring life into the world. But it's another tactic. When you take over, you want to change something quick, you want to destroy something of the old way, you want to leave your print, you have to say society can only be structured the way we do. What's the easiest target? Homosexuality is what, like 5% of the population in general. They're pretty much an easy target for this. And we know that it's a very cynical, exploitative tactic used by religions because they actually cannot get rid of homosexuality, which is not a choice. It's very much natural part of many species in the world. And the other part of it is that they can't get rid of it within their own order. All the monks who are supposed to be celibate, turns out a lot of them are homosexual. And they can't change that. So this is it seems a very cynical, exploitative way, and this mirrors what is happening in India right now, because December 2013, the Supreme Court very regrettably, makes me very angry anyway, that they reversed a lower court ruling that had legalized gay sex in general. They reversed it on, the ruling was clearly homophobic, but what Shirisa is started to say is that the venom that is coming out of Indian society, which has never been there before, homosexuality has never been an issue. I only discovered it was even possible when I came to the United States. There was nothing of that nature. There was no hatred. There was nothing particularly free, but at the same time, there was no venom. But all of a sudden now Hindu nationalists are coming out of the woodwork saying how sinful it is, how bad it is. One of the people, when this ruling was a current issue, they came on television saying, of course it needs to be banned, otherwise the soldiers on the border will start having sex with each other, and that will make it easy for Pakistan to attack us. Now this is people who don't even know anything about what they are actually trying to denounce. This is not a person who has even gone and made any kind of conceptual effort. This is not a closeted homophobe who is ashamed of himself and wants to take the hate out anywhere else. This is people who don't know any damn thing about this and are mouthing off because they see it as an easy target to enforce their Hindu, religious, traditional viewpoint over society, try to control, try to find a sect that they can demonize easily, can make people think, yes, of course, this is weird. And they take that and they exploit them. So it's entirely exploitative. I don't see any rational or any illogical or irrational reason to be in hatred of homosexuality. Yeah, if you don't understand it, you don't understand it. But to mistreat people the way they do, no, that's exploitative purely.
Yeah, but I still don't understand why, religions decided that this is something that they want to target. So,
I
go on.
I think Nirav touched upon the point for a brief while. He said procreation as being the supreme idea of sex that is promoted by most of the religions. Though I am not very sure if it was there in Hinduism, ancient Hindu texts, so very specific, and as something against homosexuality was not so clearly written. There are sculptures in Indian temples where men and women, heterosexual poses are clearly seen. They are there are sculptures designed and in a way that depicts sex in its various forms. So Hinduism in its ancient form was particularly very liberal, so to speak. From what we learn from people around. But I think nowadays people are the Hindu fundamentalists are also trying to make their religion institutionalized. That's the word that we have to get a really a good idea about, because they want to make Hinduism at par with the other Abrahamic religions. They want to imbibe some of those characteristic traits of other religions that make them so popular in so many regions of the world. So I think somewhere in the process of trying to force religion on people, and how religion works is basically by instilling fear amongst people. So something that people really do not know of, you make them scared about it, you make them feel ashamed about it, and that's the way it works. Slightly bordering on the same idea, I have a very big issue with not just this homophobia, but also with contraceptives and Vatican that takes stance on use of contraceptives. So I'm particularly very very displeased with the fact that Vatican from time and again passes these rulings and statements, and the Pope keeps making these callous statements about the prohibition of contraceptives, and how procreation should be the only sole motive of having sex. So essentially, a lot of it also is very interrelated in ways probably I do not understand at this point in time. And I mean, ironically, it's the Vatican that we hear a lot of pedophiles who really cases of children being molested and all these cases. It comes from places which are fundamentally very deeply religious. So how are we going to deal with issues that are not morally acceptable, and pushing all the blame on one particular, and narrowing it down to, say, homophobia, is one way of the religious fundamentalists targeting a specific bunch of people, and making them the victims of something that they are not really, they should not be accused of. And this is also a propaganda to sweep the finer issues, the final criminal issues of these religious places under the carpet, in order to just keep everyone under the impression. I mean, everybody really knows what goes on in the Vatican these days, because we have access to all the news items. But it's a way of propaganda, I think. I mean, against homosexuality. And we really need to talk about the stand of different religious institutions on contraceptives, because we are talking about sex and sexuality. We really need to thread on that path too.
Well, one thing I want to say about that, it seems like a lot of people suggest that, when religions are talking about sex and sexuality, it has either sometimes got to do with trying to increase their population, their number of followers, or it has to do sometimes with controlling women. But this whole idea of it being the third theory, which is it has to do a lot more with just shaming people and just them making them feel insignificant and in need of their religion and in need of their God. I think one evidence in support of that argument is the problem religion has with masturbation, because this is something that arguably has no harmful effect. Like, you can't, sometimes religious people say, like, oh, homosexuality is bad because this is the influence on society, or um, abortion is bad, this is bad because of different effects. But now when you look at masturbation, this is something that is basically one of the least harmful things anybody could do. And when religious opposition to it is just strictly that, just this is just immoral just because it's immoral. And when you think about why would religion be opposed to something like this, it seems to be that the only argument you could come up with is that it just tries to make you feel guilty and make you feel, because this is something that we know. I mean, studies show that at least when it comes to young males, well, 75% of females and almost 100% of males, this is something they do, and the numbers show that it doesn't change between religious and non-religious young adults. They all do it. So the fact that religion is against it, it seems as such an effective way of them eventually having to give in to their natural urges, and then eventually feel like they have betrayed God. They have betrayed because they think God watched while they did it. So they feel so shameful that they just did something so disgusting, and God just saw it. So they feel like they have to do something to fix that and get into God's good graces somehow, and that will bring them back into the arms of religion and to the to the community, to the community, and makes the religious community stronger. What do you guys think?
Uh, well, yeah, I think you're onto something, but also there's always been a trend across all religions, even in Abrahamic religions. But in particular, in say in India, there is a strong people always favor the ascetic. People always favor the renunciant, the person who gives up material pursuits, material pleasures, sensual pleasures. And the idea there is that giving that up gives you a sense of that you're above other people and that you have accumulating spiritual credit and you're becoming a more pious person, holier than thou, total self-control. Even to this day, people value celibacy as if it's a virtue in India. And this is where it begins. This is the idea that, and this one thing I want to explain is that, look, it's not just about celibacy. It's about giving up cooked food, of giving up meat, giving up material possessions in general, but the ascetic life that is supposed to bring you closer to the divine, closer to nature in some people's eyes, is what has always been regarded as a virtue for society across in different ways, because in India it's stronger than it is, say, in with Abrahamic religions. But even their religious leaders are completely celibate. It already puts them on a higher moral pedestal. Now, if could be people, I don't want to say that, look, celibacy is inherently wrong. If that's what you want, that's what you want. But uh, there are successive generations. Once the rules become that, well, if you want to become a cleric, if you want to become anything in this faith, or you want to be seen as a very pious person, you have to be celibate. That resentment of that sacrifice, because if that's not really coming from within you, but coming as a requirement, can make you cruel in your outlook towards others and say, how dare, of course you are lesser than us because you are not, you cannot control it. Masturbation, what you said of masturbation is, again, that's extremely thought police, but it's, again, people who are pursue religion through meditation, which is the style in the East, about Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. They are talking about meditating on their own, and they very much have this idea of thought police, because the God is, this is about you and God in that moment. And so if in your private moment you are masturbating, that is a violation of that very urge which you are talking about possessing. So a lot of people who genuinely trying to follow religion have decided to that this must stop, and then this passes on, because when they make this rule for themselves, they, whether regardless of they follow it or not, they want it to send either a shaming message towards people who do, or force other people to do the same thing.
That makes sense actually, and I think that's a little bit more true with Hinduism than Abrahamic religions. But go ahead, Suresh.
Yeah, I also have a very big issue being a self-proclaimed feminist, that women are treated like reproductive machines to this date. So, the very idea of sex is procreation that is propagated by religions, and the people who take the beating are mostly women. So, I have a very big issue with it, because even to this date, at least in India, we see a lot of this patriarchal ideas and misogynist ideas being brought forward. And very recently is one of the prominent figures in the Hindu nationalist government, who said that women should have 4 kids in order to overtake the Muslim population. Where is it all going, really? Are you really competing on overpopulating the planet? Already degrading resources. People are not even rational enough to think about it. And the next thing that we have to really talk about is probably pedophilia, because there is this one extreme where religious leaders completely condemn one form of sex and everything, and there is this other extreme of completely amoral behavior by the religious people themselves. How are they going to even justify themselves, and how religion protects a very effective shield against all these kinds of immoral behaviors is something that's a kind of it causes a sense of anxiety, because how are you going to even justify something so so bad and so not acceptable. So I mean, how are these two things, two extremes, really coming together? On so I mean, how are people going to even justify themselves for imposing their opinions on other people, on helpless, hapless little children, and even say, on animals? We have recently read an article. I mean, I think in the morning today, which said that the man had sex with a cow. Cow is considered to be very sacred in India, and people revere and respect amongst the Hindus. And there is this really pervert kind of a person who had sex with the cow, and the poor creature died. So how are we going to even account for? Yeah, how are we going to? There were pictures of it all over the websites, and it was really gory to watch. So how are people going to even talk about uh, pedophilia, of bestiality, of treating women as mere reproductive machines? I mean, how are we going to even rationally argue about all these kinds of things that religion propagates in the name of ideas about sexuality? So I have these questions that really need to be addressed and answered. I have no answers for it.
Actually, that's very, one thing I want to point out about is that that's something that people don't talk about enough, because when people talk about the cost of religion, usually what comes to people's minds are war and terrorism, um, but but people don't know that how costly religion is when it comes to population control. And for example, um, in Philippines, one of the greatest problems Philippines has is overpopulation, and one of the uh, this is a country that has a lot of poverty, and a lot of economists agree that this is because of the huge population increase. And when you go to Philippines, when you go to villages, when I was there, for every adult you see seven or eight kids, everywhere. And it's in Philippines, when me and my wife went to buy condoms, even the pharmacist would argue against using condoms. Because Philippines is a very Catholic country, and the idea of anything that could stop a pregnancy or abortion being wrong is very, very accepted, even among people that don't go to church in the Philippines. And this is a country that one of its major problems is overpopulation, and still almost everybody agrees, at least majority of the people agree, that condoms are bad, or anything that stops a pregnancy is bad. Um, and the number of people that are suffering because of this in the Philippines is huge. This is a big, big country with I don't know exactly how many people are in the Philippines. I'll check, but the number of people that are suffering because of the simple rule that when they know the Vatican is against condoms, so they are against condoms, and just because of this one simple teaching, no, the number of millions of people that are suffering economically because of this is much more than the number of people that are suffering from terrorism. And this doesn't even get much coverage. Anyways, I have more to say about that, but I wanted to let you guys speak for a little bit.
Yeah, one of the points that comes to mind from what Sirisha was saying and what you were saying is that sexual repression is a big problem with religion. It drives a lot of the fanatical element, the extremism, the sense of the behavior of Puritan-minded people. There's a severe problem because you're denying something that is actually biologically necessary for you to be a fully healthy human being. You need to be able to have sex, and that just and when the level of psychological damage that it's ingrained into you that this is a really bad thing, sinful. You can't you can't come near a woman, you can't do this, can't socialize anything. It damages people very badly, and it breeds fanatics, it breeds extremes. Look, I'm not a scientist, but from the accounts of bestiality that we find, it often, I can see some sort of correlation here, which I don't know if it's been proven or it still has to be. But between sexual repression and inability to get along with women for a variety of reasons, some of them are not social. But this is a problem that when you compulsorily divide society, I mean, look, Muslims in Britain are over the past year we've been seeing news about them insisting on gender apartheid, that women have to be segregated or not in the room at all. And a lot of religious societies, I mean, and new immigrant societies, the only socializing they do is it's around the mosque, it's around the temple, where there is a degree of gender separation anyway. So this is a sense of their masculinity and their desire to control. But apart from that, it shows you how even if you expose the religious into a new setting where it's been for a long time been accepted that men and women are equal, that it's okay to have socializing and all of that sort, they still go back to that same old misogynistic mentality, and they try to make it a norm in the name of multiculturalism. They want to even try and impose it on other people who don't have anything to do with their religious faith. So religion is definitely carrying on this problem, and is creating newer problems for societies that haven't had to deal with it in a while, and they just are at a complete loss at this point.
One thing I want to point out when it comes to Sirisha's point is that how religion is used to try to to use women and make them as tools for just procreation. Is one example of that is this hadith in Islam that tells you that a woman that denies her husband sex when he wants to have sex, if the woman denies the husband sex, she will be cursed by angels from night till morning. And this is an authentic hadith, which is for both Islam and Christianity, for religions that seem to be so anti certain kind of sex, when it comes to their own accepted sex, they're actually very sexual themselves. They're very Islam is a religion that uses sex as a reward, both in this life and the next life. When it comes to in war, for example, sex slaves are part of war booty, right? You could if actually, according to the Quran, the only way you could have sex with a married woman is if you capture her in a battle against the enemies of Allah. And also, most people know that one of the rewards of martyrdom in Islam, according to the most mainstream interpretations, is that you're going to get virgins in the afterlife. And in fact, one thing that is different between Islam's heaven and Christians' heaven is that Islam's heaven is full of sex, whereas Christians' heaven is a little bit more vague about that. But even in Christianity, in the Bible has full of is full of sex, and sex that most people today will find questionable. We have Lot offering his daughters to a whole gang of people to have sex with, just so that they leave his guests alone. And then you have the same daughters raping him so that they could be pregnant off of their father. And God has no problem with that, whereas he turns their mother into a pillar of salt just for looking back at a city, but has no problem when the daughters rape their own father. And this is the Bible, and this is something that apparently a lot of Christians don't teach their children about when they're talking about the Bible. when you read both the Bible and Hadith, the sex and sexuality come up a lot of times in very bizarre ways. But when if you don't read it directly, the way the religions teach about sex and sexuality, it's a much more censored and clean version of that, and you would never know that this is the same religion if you were comparing the actual text with what you were learning in Sunday school or what you were learning in mosque or in Islamic school studies.
Yeah, I mean, if in Hinduism, for example, it's always been cultivated as an impression that Hinduism is liberal because there have been some texts and mythological stories and art. But I actually think that this is more likely the work of an elite of a particular kingdom in ancient times, that what was allowed the intellectual class and the literates, because in those days it was all mixed, the religious word, the learned. I think it was not ever the norm for Indian society. You look at Indian society, it's full of misogyny and homophobia and just considering women not to be equal. Even after all these years of democracy, we have not, and modern education, we have not evolved to that point where we see women as being equal. And at least we definitely do believe that all women's rights do come from men. So it's as if from the male population has to reach the consensus that women are equal, which is absolutely anti-logical. But yeah, I mean, the impression that religion, the doctrine is, I think, used to control the rest of the population. And there's always been a big gap in every religion, that the ruling class has their own set of rules, and they will do whatever they want, basically. But this is a mechanism to control the rest of the population on basis of morality, and as well as keeping them in line with the leadership. The classic example of, the excuse that they give for Muhammad, who had 12 wives, while everybody is technically supposed to have 4 wives. They excuse it as being political convenience, so that he could forge an empire. Well, I think it was Christopher Hitchens who argued, I could be wrong, but well, why not give that courtesy to the other caliphs who were trying to build an empire? Could they have more wives? What's with that? So there's always been this, one set of rules for the population. Everybody else has a different set of rules.
Actually, they say that Muhammad, when he was marrying people, it was mostly for political reasons. But when you actually read the stories in the Hadith and the Quran, it was actually very clear that, for example, Muhammad was attracted to Zainab, and Zainab was married to his adopted son, and he was attracted to her, so they got divorced, and he married her instead. And it was clearly, according to Islamic's own traditional narrative, it was because he saw her and he became attracted to her. So I don't know where this argument that it was purely for political reasons come from.
Yeah, one more thing about Hinduism that I have a problem with, let us say, is the idea of arranged marriages. Deciding who, essentially decide the older folks deciding for the younger generation who they should have sex with, essentially, when they decide who you should marry. And it's almost within the same caste, and it comes from a very deep rooted psychology of preserving the pure blood that they believe comes from within their own caste, and not venturing out of the system. So something that we haven't been able to do away with, and something we haven't been able to overcome, is the idea of marrying within the same community or the same caste. And how is anyone else really an authority in deciding about something as private as your own sex life? So something we haven't been able to address, and generations together of young men and women, even to this date, however educated they might be, whatever access to technology and the modernities that they have, now people eventually fall into the trap of getting arranged married. I mean, something that even I have faced personally in my life, because time and again I see this pressure mounting from my folks, where they believe that, I mean, the best way for a girl to keep her purity and virginity intact is to get into an arranged marriage system where the man takes care of the woman. And like Nirav has mentioned, all the rights of the women in India are derived from that of a man. Even the laws are designed in a fashion that essentially portray the same idea. So how are we going to do away with things that are prevalent to this date, and which essentially are the small points, as we can say, but something that religion has had a big role to play in deciding private lives of people. So unless we really talk about it and do something about all these rituals and systems that have been ingrained into the society of different societies, let's say built around cultural and religious practices, I don't think we see a way of moving ahead in any definite direction.
What do you guys think about the claim that marriage is purely a religious concept, and it came from religion, and it was basically just a sales contract before, um, and some atheists and secularists believe that because it's just a religious concept, maybe in modern times we could just do away with the whole concept of marriage altogether, and we don't need it, and it's just an ancient practice that is not practical anymore.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to do away with it. If somebody wants to get married, then call it marriage. It's entirely a question of free will, is what is necessary, rather than abolishing or being excessively promoting of any particular concept. Uh, Marriage, again, it's like it goes more into society. Yeah, religion consecrates marriage just as it consecrates kings, etc. It gives it the stamp of legitimacy. But like what Sirisha was saying, intercaste marriages, yeah, there is a religious logic to it, but it's also there's a tribal logic to it. It's about keeping ancient India was not a very easy place to move around in, because you were always getting invaded. It was a feudal atmosphere, and so the people that of your socioeconomic status and people around you, you formed a tribal connection with them, and you felt comfortable giving your daughters to them rather than people from other parts of the country. That's not the case anymore. Economic transformation is there. Marriage, I don't think it has ever been. I mean, I imagine that men always, the concept, the unit of a family is predates organized religion. So I'm not really sure why it would be just a religious concept. It would be more than that. But yeah, sure, religion using it, making it part of its fabric, absolutely.
Well, the concept of marriage when it comes to religion has been a way for governments to get involved in marriage, and if it was completely independent of religion, then people would argue the government wouldn't be involved in deciding who's married and who's not married. Anyways, it would be purely a um personal decision, and completely independent from law and you know deciding. But another thing is that then what would you do if government is not involved with deciding who's married and who's not? Then how would you decide who's civil union rights, um, and a lot of, and one thing that religious people always claim is that if you remove the role of government and religion from the process of marriage, then everything is going to be acceptable. And that's one of the arguments they make. They say, like, then it's going to be the two men and four women all of a sudden going to be married together as a whole. And some religious people even try to make a point by suggesting that if we remove the influence of religion in marriage, then all of a sudden people are going to get married to their cats and dogs, and all sort of uh, scenarios are going to pop up.
Yeah, I mean that's basic scaremongering 101, but it's in a sense it's completely anti-logical, and it's this stuff doesn't happen. Like they promise to do this during gay marriage, that yeah, everything will fall apart. We've had this for about at least half a decade now in the US, more in other places. Society doesn't fall apart, becomes a slightly happier place. And the cats and the bestiality, that's a way to scare people. There is absolutely no like I said earlier, when they talk about homosexuality in India, there is no connection whatsoever. They don't even understand the concept they're banning. But this comes down to the ability of banning and controlling a section of the population to keep the rest of the population in line and in a particular direction. Look, this has been in my head for a bit. When we are talking, the one thing that keeps on occurring to me is that this is some sort of a metaphor of actually a ridiculous sex act being perpetrated in general. Men creating rules of all kinds, religion, social, political, to control the lives of women. This is some sort of a gigantic and ridiculous metaphorical sex act that is being perpetrated on a day-to-day basis, and this is the perennial dance between the man and woman. This is what we are talking about here. Go.
Sirisha, do you want to?
Yeah, I think I would really like to second Nirav's point of view there, because it's the fundamental necessity of controlling people and controlling people in their sex lives, especially because there is not enough awareness amongst people about different aspects of sexuality that religion takes advantage of, essentially. And it builds on the fear, it builds on the complex, and it's basically a way of enslaving people to their ideas. So if you indulge in an act of homosexuality, then you deserve this kind of a punishment. If you've committed adultery, then you deserve that kind of a punishment. So essentially, religion is trying to control people's private lives in ways that we cannot even imagine, because by deciding upon something which is so private and should be left to the individual, if it's institutionalized in such a massive scale.
Okay, I think we lost Sirisha, but
Which is picking up in the world, or you succumb to it. Homosexuals in India, transgenders in India, the topic of transgenders is also a very sensitive topic in India. So there are a bunch of people who in the past apparently had their genitals removed, had the reproductive organs removed, and they behaved in a fashion that would make them ostracized in the society, and they would make them they would go around as being a neutral gender. And the people don't really look up at them in a very respectable fashion. They resort to begging on the streets. That's the only profession they are left for. This is for the neutral gender. And there are transgenders who are not understood just as much. So there is a lot of lack of awareness in Indian society, and essentially the stigma that surrounds the different aspects of sexuality, which really needs to be brought forward and be discussed more openly. The very reason that we do not discuss sex and sexuality so openly, and it's also within the families, that the parents really do not tell their children what is right and what is wrong. And and instead of imposing morals on children, which generally is the way sex education, even if it is given in the family or in the schools, if you let the children think for themselves and figure things, let them figure things out for themselves, that you can really let the society grow. But with a given amount of stigma and fear surrounding, um, like I said, like I repeat, different aspects of sexuality, it becomes very difficult and a very very complicated topic to really talk about and get people become more aware of it. So
All right. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, actually just a quick comment on the neutral gender. The term, the phenomenon, at least in South Asia, is a hijra, and this is basically, these are not, even to begin with, these are normal people, normal men who castrate themselves, who and emasculate themselves as well, go through a very painful operation without anesthesia to experience the painful ecstasy of the god Aravan, whose followers they are. Now, this is, we can talk about male to female sex, but this gives a pause to kind of observe how sexual roles and how it is influencing men, that you cut off your organ and you essentially take out testosterone from your system, and you become more female like, and you're doing this. There have been abuses, there have been young kids who've been kidnapped into this also, but a lot of these is being done by fairly grown up young men who want to follow this god. So this is like, take a pause and you have a look at this and their understanding of sex and role. They want to get out of their gender, and this is the level of the religious faith that they have. It's just, the role of religion in controlling sexuality. This can get to this level. I haven't heard of anything that makes a woman stop being a woman as of yet. I mean, they're degraded, yes, but you don't stop being a woman. In this situation, they're actually making men
have you
not be
heard,
men.
Neerav, have you heard of something called female genital mutilation, which is so rampant across the Western India and also in some parts of Africa? It's as much a painful procedure done on women, and under no anesthesia, no absolutely no hygiene or sanitation, and woman is left tied up to a bed to let the wounds heal for itself. I mean, how can such abhorrent practices be going on in 21st century even today? When I mean, it's basically religious, and what saddens me most is all this kind of customs, and in the name of traditions and customs, it's the women who impose certain traditions on women. It's not the men who do these things to women anymore. It's the mother telling the little girl that once she is prepubescent or hits puberty, she needs to get her genitals mutilated, because when she grows up and she gets married, stitches performed on her, on the urethral opening, because the only motive of the woman is to pleasure the man. So essentially, the mother telling the child to undergo such painful procedures when she is barely 12 or 13, when she doesn't even understand what's happening with her, and to decide on her sexuality is completely not acceptable. Why aren't people framing laws on these? Why aren't people discussing things more like these? Why aren't people talking about the neutral gender, homosexuality, bringing more awareness about it, about female genital mutilation, and so many bestiality, child, pedophilia and all of it. How do people even manage to deal with so many negative aspects of religion that imposes on the sexual behavior of individuals, and be focused on something very, very narrow and something they do not completely understand about? So I mean, though there is nothing that does not make that does not deny a woman from being a woman, like what happens with in the case of making a man get castricized, but I'm very, very positive that female genital mutilation cannot be a pleasant thing at all. I mean, it's just as painful and it's just as degrading. And we live in a society that, I mean, such practices are still happening to this date.
Yeah, and it's actually very common also in Egypt. And I just want to say one organization that is fighting against that a lot is Ayan Hirsi Ali's organization, um, the AHA organization, which is they are trying to fight female genital mutilation. And correct me if I'm wrong, they do that mostly to females, but to remove the clitoris to so that there's no pleasure in sex for the female. Is that the main reason behind that practice?
From what I have read somewhere, and it was a very authentic UN report on why the female genital mutilation in Africa is so rampant, is because, like I mentioned before, they believe that, yeah, they remove the clitoris, and they also seal the urethral opening, the opening to the vagina, and in the process of doing that, what they believe is it is basically to pleasure the man when she has sex for the first time after she gets married or something like that. When she has sex, the man needs to derive pleasure out of it, and I mean, to put it very rawly, the narrower the opening, the more pleasure he derives out of it. So something in relation to this, that they have developed traditions and customs, and they use knives and blades and whatnot on the poor girl, and tie her up, shame her. I completely cannot imagine the kind of shame that she has to go through, and what kind of a body image such a girl would have when she grows up, when she's led to believe that she's just a reproductive machine and a pleasure seeking device. Her body is just a pleasure seeking mechanism for the man to take advantage of. So and
What's
I mean, one of the major reasons why in South Asia women have such low image of their bodies is they're treated in a subservient manner. They are treated as not as equals, but misogyny and patriarchy is so prevalent in the society, even here. And I've heard that female genital mutilation happens somewhere in the western part of the country as well here. Under the topic which said, under the title, if I'm not wrong, mm, an open secret. I think I'll fish out the article and I'll give it out to you sometime, and then sometime. But it just got me revolted and nauseated. And how are we going to deal with body image issues of these women when they grow up? Really, how are we going to instill confidence in these women when they are led to believe in such I don't know. I don't have a word for it. Such practices.
well, what kind of a parent do you have to be okay with, just standing by while somebody does that to your child? I mean, like, think about a father or a mother that is like, yeah, I'm gonna have this procedure done on my daughter so that when she grows up, she could pleasure a man better? Like, are you seriously gonna take your daughter's hand and walk her to this whatever place they do these things and just give her to these people and just stand by and let them do this to her? Like, how messed up an ideology has to be for a parent to be okay with that?
I think it has to also do with a very powerful concept called purity. And I'm not, again, I have very little information on this, but it sounds to me that this procedure of genital mutilation is a lot to do with trying to prevent, at least in their minds, prevent premarital sex. And that's a very powerful concept, even for where the custom is not in place. Women having sex out of wedlock is a huge problem. To a lesser extent, it's with men, but men don't face any consequences. It's women who have to deal with this. So the idea that's possibly going through the head of the parents is that we want to guarantee in front of the world and in front of God that our girl is absolutely morally chaste and pure, and she's she's not a, unfortunately the word, she's not a slut. This is, it's a very radical truth, the way the thinking works. If you don't have it done, you're a slut. It has nothing to do with anything else. I mean, whatever your decisions are. And this is the black and white situation that is being created. And the concept of purity is very, very important. And in India, there are some parts where if you marry out of your tribe or your caste, your parents will actually try to kill you. And this happens in Pakistan also. So it's more of a tribal thing, but sanctified by religion all the time. And again, the driving concept is the concept of female purity. It can upset a village, it can upset a tribe, it can upset a caste if one of their girls gets into any kind of non agreed, relationship with someone that basically that the tribal elders don't like. It could be within the caste also, for all we know. They control the lives to that level that if one girl, the whole village, the tribe has to go down and wreak vengeance, kill them, or even gang rape them, and the honor killings, the entire concept of that. So it's extremely important, this concept of purity. It's a very emotional issue in Asia and Africa, and I'm sure it was for a long time in Europe and America as well.
This obsession with female purity is ridiculous. I mean, if a man, even among non-religious people, when a man has a lot of partners, like the words that they use, you can see how different it is. When a man has a lot of partners, they call him like a player, like, oh yeah, you're like such a ladies' man. But when a woman has a lot of partners, they call her a slut, and it looks down upon, and it looks as if it's something to be ashamed of. And if when a father finds out that his son, for example, is popular with the girls, he's like, oh yeah, this is my boy. But when he finds out that his daughter is very popular with the boys, all of a sudden, his attitude towards that is completely different. And is this mostly an influence of religion, or is this? It just seems like as if it's a property issue, like as if like men own women, and you don't want your property to be, tainted or like used before somebody else gets the pure version of it. But that mentality doesn't exist with men, because men are not property. So it doesn't really matter how much sex they have; they're still the same. Even if they have 100 partners, they're still the same person. But if a woman has one partner, now all of a sudden she's a different commodity, because now she's been used. It's like as if they're treating her as a used product now. So her value all of a sudden decreases significantly. Even if you, for example, if you look at the way a lot of Muslims talk about Western culture, and they say like, why do you let look at these Westerners, why do they let their women do this, why do they dress like this, or like, and the way they usually talk about it is their women, like as if we have a right, as if they are ours, and we have a right to tell them how to behave. It's as if we are like it's like children, and we're just letting them do what they want. Is as if we have to control them, as if they are ours to control. And this mentality is very strong, and especially, I don't know how it is among very religious Christian families and cultures, but I know it's very common among most religious Muslims. But go on, Sarisha, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I completely have had an issue with this for a very long time, about how derogatory, how everything that's related to a woman is practically an insult. So they say you cry like a woman to a man, and that's it. You're weak. You're not even strong enough. Come on, a man can also cry. I mean, all of us have emotions. So to use such phrases which look at women in such derogatory way and in such low light, and to treat women as property, like you rightly mentioned, because that's a practice very common in India as well. Because the girl first is the father's property, who decides who she gets married to, and then she becomes the husband's property. And it's just a passing over the rights of the woman, the rights of who controls the woman from the father to the husband. I mean, we have been raising voices against it, and maybe the change is slow, and we would see some change someday, but at the present moment the situation is just as bad. And to treat another human being, let's say, why don't you even look at a woman, as a human being, who is completely capable of achieving everything that you can practically achieve. And Like you mentioned, the word slut, and all these are used in such derogatory ways. We try to avoid those words. We have been, and these days feminism has also become a dirty word. People who claim to be feminists, they try to portray themselves as being men haters. I'm sure they have reasons for hating men, maybe some personal issues that they come from, but then essentially you cannot portray everyone who believes in certain ideas which are just as abstract. As say, how do you define an abelian group in a group theory? You cannot put everyone together under the same garb. And we haven't been able to, as a society, we have failed to deal with issues like these, and you know to bring in equality. And somewhere I have a very strong idea that it all stems from religion, because it is how we have evolved over years, and it is how men have treated women over years. And even the rituals and pujas in the Hindu customs, and even the marriage custom in the Hindu tradition is designed in a way where the priest essentially first marries the woman. Not many people know about the chants and the mantras, but the priest is the first person who marries the woman, and he transfers that act of marriage to the boy who is actually getting married to the girl in the marriage. So why are you even doing things like that? Why is it so ingrained in the rituals and practices that a woman has to be a property? And I speak it from a perspective of a woman, but there are other issues, other aspects of sexuality, like I mentioned before, that the world needs to really deal with. And we as a society are really struggling to come to equal terms with all these ideas that we have.
I just want to have a slight disagreement with what Shirish has said, that I don't think it's religion that's at the root cause, because a lot of the things that what you, Armin, were saying are the attitudes of secular, liberal-minded people in a secular, non-religious setting. They still try to control women, even if it's in an ironic or joking way. It's always the same concept, that there's a idea of trying to control women. Well, man is the hunter, and so he can sow his seed wherever he may. Women have to confine themselves to one. That sort of mentality is seen across the board. What I think is that it's religion. Basically, that's religion is using a natural element of society for its own, and it's shaping itself. Basically, it's incorporating this for its own advantage. I can see that, but I don't see religion as the origin of this instinct and this behavior.
Yeah, I actually think a lot of the things that religion does, the desire for it exists without religion, but it's just that religion provides such a good excuse and so much tools for doing it. For example, the desire to control women would exist with or without religion. It's just that religion just gives it a divine purpose, excuse, and gives you a lot of rules and a good toolkit for you, a very effective toolkit for you to do it. Same with war and a lot of different other things that religions are accused of. The main purpose usually as something else. You know, when it comes to war, for example, the ultimate goal sometimes is not religious. It's just that religion is such an effective way of convincing people to fight your causes. It's not the, even if it's not the cause, it's a very effective excuse. If you guys don't have anything else to add, I think we already went way over an hour, so I'm gonna stop it here. But I'm gonna hang around after the discussion. Oh, also, we mentioned Dr. Darrel Ray's book, Sex and God, which I will be linking to in the YouTube of this video, YouTube page of this video. And we also mentioned Einher CLE's foundation, which I will also link in the comment section, in the description section. All right.